right, beautiful day here at Gray Whale Cove. I'm thinking of doing a larger version of a composition I've done in the past. I did an 11 by 14. Today I'm going to be working a little bit larger. I'm painting over an old painting on a 24 by 30 inch stretch canvas, and I'll be using my usual limited palette of colors. All right, so here is the inspiration. I'm going to make some changes compositionally. I'm going to move the distant land so that it's visible between the two trees. I'm starting with a dark mixture of ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and a touch of burnt sienna. The trees are the most important part of the composition, so I want to get them in place before I start covering the rest of the canvas. I've been enjoying working larger lately, so the smallest I've done in the last couple months is about this size, 24 by 30 inch. And I'm really enjoying having the extra room to swing the brush. It took me a long time to feel comfortable or to have the confidence to paint larger canvases. I remember I bought this easel here, which is an Anderson easel made by takeiteasel.com. I had this easel for probably 6 to 8 months before I actually got out and painted with it. Painting larger does pose some challenges, mostly logistical challenges. For example, carrying a large wet canvas is more difficult, and also you have to have a larger easel. All right, I've got some titanium white tinted with ultramarine blue. I'm going to quickly suggest some breaking waves here. There's also a distant shoreline out here. For the water, I'm starting with a mixture of ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, titanium white, and I've got a bit of cadmium yellow medium in the mix as well. Just working very quickly here to eliminate the old painting. I've done this composition before on a smaller panel, and I really liked the results. And that painting was painted over an old painting. It was done very quickly. It was an 11 by 14, and I did it in about 20 minutes. So I'm going to try to work really quickly with this one as well. And that's part of the reason I'm painting over an old canvas, is because the smaller painting turned out so well. And like I said, it was painted over an old painting. And it can be nice because you can get little bits of color and maybe some darker and lighter values popping through. So it's starting to take shape. If you're struggling to paint larger, I think painting over old paintings can be a fun way to make the transition, because there's really nothing to lose. It's also really helpful to lower your expectations. And that's sort of how I paint when I paint over old paintings. I try to paint without expectation, although I have to say that over the years I've got to the point where I paint without expectation almost all the time. When I scrubbed in the tree shapes, I worked quickly and I wasn't too careful, because I know that I'll actually use the negative space around the tree to define the tree. So I'm now coming in with some water to define the branches. For the distant land, I'm starting with a mixture of burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, titanium white, and a touch of cadmium yellow medium. I've also got a bit of ultramarine blue in the mix to kind of gray it down a bit. And this mix may be a bit saturated, which is okay. I can gray it down as necessary. Just approximating colors at this point, trying to get the big shapes in place. Again, using the negative space around the tree to define the tree. I'm keeping the mix thin though, because I don't want to be too committed to the tree trunks and the branches that I've got. I want to be able to change them, so I don't want to be working into thick paint just yet. But I do want to eliminate the old painting just so I can see what I'm working with here. All right, so at this point, the canvas is covered. I step back about 10 or 15 feet and just looking at the shapes, trying to decide if I want to make any changes. I do think that I want the tree trunks to be a little bit thicker, but I do like the placement of the trees and I like the proportions. I'm making this tree trunk here a little bit wider, a little more substantial. This tree trunk over here actually splits into two different trunks. My process for painting trees is to establish the main trunks and branches first, and then I'll start adding the smaller branches afterwards. But I want to make sure that the overall tree structure is something that works with the composition. I'm going back and forth between the positive shapes of the tree and the negative space behind the tree. The tops of the trees are pretty dense, so putting in a bunch of branches and some dark areas, something like that. Just trying to create an interesting tree silhouette. I am looking at the trees for inspiration, but I'm making changes. And compositionally, for the sky, I'm starting with a mix of ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, titanium white, and alizarin crimson. Sort of a grayish purple color. Further defining some of these branches here. All right, now I want to start adding in some branches. When I add the branches, I try to work as quickly as possible and not overthink. There's a cast shadow on the ground, and so I want to establish that before adding the light bits to the ground. I'm trying to keep this shadow shape spontaneous and irregular. I almost approach shadows the way I approach painting branches. I want the shapes to be interesting so that they help the overall composition. Adding a warm mix to hopefully establish a light effect. Using the negative space to carve out the shadows. I want to redefine the edge of the land where it meets the water. So after the block-in is completed and I'm happy with the shapes, then I reinforce the shapes with thicker paint. And all I do is I look at the subject and I squint to throw my eyes out of focus, and I just look for the darkest darks and I work towards the light. During the initial block-in, the strokes are more scrubby, but at this point, I load the brush and make deliberate strokes, and I just keep building up the painting with these deliberate strokes until it's finished. I'm looking for shifts in value and color within the shapes that I've established. There is some light coming from the left-hand side here, so I'm now adding some warm bits. Got a mixture here of cadmium red medium and cadmium yellow medium. Also a bit of titanium white. Sneaking in little bits of red into the painting. This will help, hopefully, with feeling of illumination. If I feel like I've gone overboard with the red, I can always tone it down. Adding some dark bits to the water to suggest wave activity. right, so here's what I finished up with. This painting took about 2 hours to complete. It was finished on site. I'm going to put an 11 by 14 in here just so you can see the size difference. The goal with this painting was to work quickly and keep it feeling loose and spontaneous. And I wanted to have visible brush strokes in this painting. So I decided to stop earlier than usual. I felt myself getting a little fussy with details, so I forced myself to stop so that I don't overwork it. And I'm glad that I did, because once I got it home, I felt like the level of finish was appropriate, or it was kind of what I was after. I recently committed to painting larger paintings on location. In the past, I would usually paint 16 by 20s. That was sort of my standard size. But in the last 2 months or month and a half, I've bumped it up to 24 by 30, 24 by 36. And I've decided to continue working in this size until it feels comfortable, which actually I have to say, it does feel comfortable, and now this feels like the new normal. So if you're trying to bump up the size that you're painting, you know, say from an 11 by 14 to a 16 by 20, I think the best way to go is to commit to that larger size and then just do it for a month or two, and it will become the new normal. It might feel uncomfortable the first time, but it is surprising how fast it becomes comfortable. In the past, I used to only do large paintings once in a while, and I wasn't able to really get into any kind of groove with it. Make that leap, make that commitment, and it will be easier than you think. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. It's a Patreon support that helps keep me making these videos, and it's much appreciated. There's also a PayPal tip jar down below, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative. I'll see you guys in the next video.